The Restaurant at the End of the Universe by Douglas Adams. Chapter 24. Captain?
Yes, number one?
Just had a sort of report thingy from number 2.
Oh dear.
High up in the bridge of the ship, the captain stared out to the infinite reaches of space with mild irritation. From where he reclined beneath a wild dawn bubble, he could see before and above him the vast panorama of stars through which they were moving. A panorama that had thinned out noticeably during the course of the voyage. Turning and looking backwards over the vast 2-mile bulk of the ship, he could see the far denser mass of stars behind them, which seemed to form almost a solid band. This was the view through the galactic centre from which they were travelling, and indeed had been travelling for years, at a speed that he couldn't quite remember at the moment, but he knew that it was terribly fast. It was something approaching the speed of something or other, or was it 3 times the speed of something else? Jolly impressive anyway. He peered into the bright distance behind the ship, looking for something. He did this every few minutes or so, but never found what he was looking for. He didn't let it worry him, though. The scientist chaps had been very insistent that everything was going to be perfectly all right, providing nobody panicked and everybody got on and did their bit in an orderly fashion. He wasn't panicking. As far as he was concerned, everything was going splendidly. He dabbed at his shoulder with a large, frothy sponge. It crept back into his mind that he was feeling mildly irritated about something. Now, what was all that about? A slight cough alerted him to the fact that the ship's first officer was still standing nearby. Nice chap, number 1. Not of the very brightest. Had the odd spot of difficulty doing up his shoelaces, but jolly good officer material for all that. The captain wasn't a man to kick a chap when he was bending over trying to do up his shoelaces, however long it took him. Not like that ghastly number 2, strutting about all over the place, polishing his buttons, issuing reports every hour. "Ship still moving, Captain." "Still on course, Captain." "Oxygen levels still being maintained, Captain." Give it a miss, was the captain's thought. Ah, yes, that was the thing that had been irritating. He peered down at number 1. "Yes, Captain, he was shouting something or other about having found some prisoners." The captain thought about this. Seemed pretty unlikely to him, but he wasn't one to stand in his officer's way. "Well, perhaps that'll keep him happy for a bit," he said. "He's always wanted some." Forward Prefect and Arthur Dent trudged onwards up the ship's apparently endless corridors. Number 2 marched behind them, barking the occasional order about not making any false moves or trying any funny stuff. They seemed to have passed at least a mile of continuous brown Hessian wool weave. Finally, they reached a large steel door which slid open when number 2 shouted at it. They entered. To the eyes of Forward Prefect and Arthur Dent, the most remarkable thing about the ship's bridge was not the 50-foot diameter hemispherical dome which covered it and through which the dazzling display of stars shone down on them. To people who have eaten at the restaurant at the end of the universe, such wonders are commonplace. Nor was it the bewildering array of instruments that crowded the long circumferential wall around them. To Arthur this was exactly what spaceships were traditionally supposed to look like, and to Ford it looked thoroughly antiquated. It confirmed his suspicions that Disaster Area's stunt ship had taken them back at least 1 million, if not 2 million years before their own time. No, the thing that really caught them off balance was the bath. The bath stood on a 6-foot pedestal of rough-hewn blue water crystal and was of a baroque monstrosity not often seen outside the Maximegalon Museum of Diseased Imaginings. An intestinal jumble of plumbing had been picked out in gold leaf rather than decently buried at midnight in an unmarked grave. The taps and shower attachment would have made a gargoyle jump. As the dominant centrepiece of a starship bridge, it was terribly wrong, and it was with the embittered air of a man who knew this that number 2 approached it. "Captain, sir," he shouted through clenched teeth, a difficult trick that he'd had years during which to perfect it. A large genial face and a genial foam-covered arm popped up above the rim of the monstrous bath. "Ah, hello, number 2, said the captain, waving a cheery sponge. "Having a nice day?" Number 2 snapped even further to attention than he already was. "I've brought you the prisoners I located in Freezer Bay 7, sir," he yapped. Ford and Arthur coughed in confusion. "Hello," they said. The captain beamed at them. So number 2 had really found some prisoners. Well, good for him, thought the captain. Nice to see a chap doing what he's best at.
"Ah, hello there," he said to them. "Excuse me not getting up, just having a quick bath. Well, gin and tonics all round then. Look in the fridge, number 1.
"Certainly, sir." It is a curious fact, and one to which no one knows quite how much importance to attach, that something like 85% of all known worlds in the galaxy, be they primitive or highly advanced, have invented a drink called gin and tonics, or G-N-T-N-X, or gin and onyx, or any one of 1,000 more variations on the same phonetic theme. The drinks themselves are not the same, and vary between the Sivlovian Chinanto Mings, which is ordinary water served at slightly above room temperature, and the Gagra Kakan Chin Antoni K's, which kills cows at 100 paces. And in fact, the one common factor between all of them, beyond the fact that the names sound the same, is that they were all invented and named before the worlds concerned made contact with any other worlds. What can be made of this fact? It exists in total isolation. As far as any theory of structural linguistics is concerned, it is right off the graph, and yet it persists. Old structural linguists get very angry when young structural linguists go on about it. Young structural linguists get deeply excited about it and stay up late at night convinced they are very close to something of profound importance, and end up becoming old structural linguistics before their time, getting very angry with the young ones. Structural linguistics is a bitterly divided and unhappy discipline, and a large number of its practitioners spend too many nights drowning their problems in whiskey and sodas. Number 2 stood before the captain's bathtub, trembling with frustration.
"Don't you want to interrogate the prisoners, sir?" he squealed.
The captain peered at him in bemusement. "Why on Golga Frenchen should I want to do that?" he asked.
"To get information out of them, sir. To find out why they came here."
"Oh, no," said the captain. "I expect they just dropped in for a quick gin and tonics, don't you?"
"But, sir, they're my prisoners. I must interrogate them."
The captain looked at them doubtfully. "All right," he said. "If you must, ask them what they want to drink." A hard, cold gleam came into number 2's eyes. He advanced slowly on Ford Prefect and Arthur Dent.
"All right, you scum," he growled. "You vermin." He jabbed Ford with the killer's up gun.
"Steady on, number 2, admonished the captain gently.
"What do you want to drink?"
number 2 screamed. "Well, the gin and tonics sound nice to me," said Ford. "What about you, Arthur?" Arthur blinked. "What, yes," he said.
"With ice or without?"
bellowed number 2. "Oh, with, please," said Ford.
"Lemon?"
"Yes, please," said Ford. "And do you have one of those little biscuits? You know, the cheesy ones."
"I'm asking the questions here,"
howled number 2, his body quaking with apoplectic fury. Number 2, said the captain softly.
"Sir!"
"Push off, would you? There's a good chap. I'm trying to have a relaxing bath." Number 2's eyes narrowed and became what are known in the shouting and killing people trade as cord slits. The idea presumably being to give your opponent the impression that you have lost your glasses or are having difficulty keeping awake. Why, this is frightening, is and yet unresolved problem. He advanced on the captain. His, number 2's, mouth a thin, hard line. Again, tricky to know why this is understood as fighting behaviour. If, whilst wandering through the jungle of Trull, you were suddenly to come across the fabled ravenous bug-bladder beast, you would have reason to be grateful if its mouth was a thin, hard line, rather than, as it usually is, a gaping mass of slavering fangs.
"May I remind you, sir," hissed number 2 at the captain, "that you have now been at the bath for over 3 years."
This final shot delivered, number 2 spun on his heel and stalked off to a corner to practice darting eye movements in the mirror. The captain squirmed in his bath. He gave Ford Prefect a lame smile.
"Well, you need to relax a lot in a job like mine," he said.
Ford slowly lowered his hands. It provoked no reaction. Arthur lowered his. Treading very slowly and carefully, Ford moved over to the bath pedestal. He patted it. Nice, he lied. He wondered if it was safe to grin. Very slowly and carefully, he grinned. It was safe. He said to the captain. Yes, said the captain. I wonder, said Ford. Could I ask you actually what your job is, in fact? A hand tapped him on the shoulder. He spun round. It was the first officer. Your drinks, he said. Oh, thank you, said Ford. He and Arthur took their gin and tonics. Arthur sipped his and was surprised to discover it tasted very much like a whisky and soda. I mean, I couldn't help noticing, said Ford, also taking a sip. The bodies in the hold. Bodies? Said the captain in surprise. Ford paused and thought to himself. Never take anything for granted, he thought. Could it be that the captain doesn't know he's got 15 million dead bodies on his ship? The captain was nodding cheerfully at him. He also appeared to be playing with a rubber duck. Ford looked round. Number 2 was staring at him in the mirror, but only for an instant. His eyes were constantly on the move. The first officer was just standing there holding the drinks tray and smiling benignly. Bodies? Said the captain again. Ford licked his lips. Yes, he said. All those dead telephone sanitizers and account executives, down in the hold. The captain stared at him. Suddenly he threw back his head and laughed. Oh, no. Oh, they're not dead, he said. Good Lord, no, they're frozen. They're going to be revived. Ford did something he very rarely did. He blinked. Arthur seemed to come out of a trance. You mean you've got a hold full of frozen hairdressers? He said. Oh, yes, said the captain. Millions of them. Hairdressers, tired TV producers, insurance salesmen, personnel officers, security guards, public relations executives, management consultants. You name it, we're going to colonize another planet. Ford wobbled very slightly. Exciting, isn't it? Said the captain. What? With that lot? Said Arthur. Oh, no, don't misunderstand me, said the captain. We're just one of the ships in the Ark fleet. We're the B Ark, you see. Sorry, could I just ask you to run a bit more hot water for me? Arthur obliged, and a cascade of pink frothy water swirled around the bath. The captain let out a sigh of pleasure. Thank you so much, my dear fellow. Do help yourselves to more drinks, of course. Ford tossed down his drink, took the bottle from the first officer's tray, and refilled his glass to the top. What, he said, is a Ark? This is, said the captain, and swished the foamy water round joyfully with the duck. Yes, said Ford, but... Well, what happened, you see, was, said the captain, our planet, the world from which we have come, was, so to speak, doomed. Doomed? Oh, yes. So what everyone thought was, let's pack the whole population into some giant spaceships and go and settle on another planet. Having told this much of his story, he settled back with a satisfied grunt. You mean a less doomed one? Prompted Arthur. What did you say, dear fellow? A less doomed planet you were going to settle on. Are going to settle on, yes. So it's decided to build 3 ships, you see. 3 arcs in space, and I'm not boring you, am I? No, said Ford firmly. It's fascinating. It's delightful, reflected the captain, to have someone else to talk to for a change. Number 2's eyes darted feverishly about the room again, and then settled back on the mirror, like a pair of flies briefly distracted from their favourite piece of month-old meat. Trouble with a long journey like this, continued the captain, is that you end up just talking to yourself a lot, which gets terribly boring, because half the time you know what you're going to say next. Only half the time? Asked Arthur in surprise. The captain thought for a moment. Yes, about half, I'd say. Anyway, where's the soap? He fished around and he found it. Yes, so anyway, he resumed, the idea was that into the first ship, the A ship, would go all the brilliant leaders, the scientists, the great artists, all the achievers. And into the third, or C ship, would go all the people who did the actual work, who made things and did things. And then into the B ship, that's us, would go everyone else. The middlemen, you see. He smiled happily at them.
And we were sent off first," he concluded,
and hummed a little bathing tune. The little bathing tune, which had been composed for him by one of the world's most exciting and prolific jingle writers, who was currently asleep in hold 36 some 900 yards behind them, covered what would otherwise have been an awkward moment of silence. Ford and Arthur shuffled their feet and furiously avoided each other's eyes. Said Arthur after a moment. "What exactly was it that was wrong with your planet, then?"
"Oh, it was doomed, as I said," said the captain. "Apparently it was going to crash into the sun or something. Or maybe it was the moon was going to crash into us. Something of the kind. Absolutely terrifying prospect, whatever it was."
"Oh," said the first officer suddenly. "I thought it was that the planet was going to be invaded by a gigantic swarm of 12-foot piranha bees. Wasn't that it?" Number 2 spun round, eyes ablaze with a cold, hard light that only comes with the amount of practice he was prepared to be put in.
"That's not what I was told," he hissed. "My commanding officer told me that the entire planet was in imminent danger of being eaten by enormous mutant stargoat."
"Oh, really?" said Ford Prefect.
"Yes, a monstrous creature from the pit of hell, with scything teeth 10,000 miles long, breath that could boil oceans, claws that could tear continents from their roots, 1,000 eyes that burned like the sun, slaving jaws 1,000,000 miles across, a monster such as you have never...
"And they made sure they sent your lot off first, did they?" inquired Arthur.
"Oh, yes," said the captain. "Well, everyone said, very nicely I thought, that it was very important for morale to feel they would be arriving on a planet where they could be sure of a good haircut and where the phones were clean."
"Oh, yes," agreed Ford. "I could see that would be very important. And the other ships, they followed on after you, did they?" For a moment the captain did not answer. He twisted round in his bath and gazed backwards over the huge bulk of the ship towards a bright galactic centre. He squinted into the inconceivable distance.
Well, it's funny you should say that," he said,
and allowed himself a slight frown at Ford Prefect.
"Because, curiously enough, we haven't heard a peep out of them since we left 5 years ago. But they must be behind us somewhere."
He peered off into the distance again. Ford peered with him and gave a thoughtful frown. "Unless, of course," he said softly, "they were eaten by the goat."
"Ah, yes," said the captain with a slight hesitancy creeping into his voice. "The goat."
His eyes passed over the solid shapes of the instruments and computers that lined the bridge. They winked away innocently at him. He stared out at the stars, but none of them said a word. He glanced at his first and second officers, but they seemed lost in their own thoughts for a moment. He glanced at Ford Prefect and raised his eyebrows at him.
"It's a funny thing, you know," said the captain at last. "But now that I actually come to tell the story to someone else, I mean, does it strike you as odd, Number 1?
Said Number 1. "Well," said Ford Prefect, "I can see you've got a lot of things you're going to want to talk about, so thanks for the drinks, and if you could sort of drop us off at the nearest convenient planet."
Well, that's a bit difficult, you see," said the captain, "because our trajectory thingy was preset before we left Golga Frinchen. I think partly because I'm not very good with figures."
"You mean we're stuck here on this ship?" exclaimed Ford, suddenly losing patience with the whole charade. "When are you meant to be reaching this planet you're meant to be colonising?"
"Oh, we're nearly there, I think," said the captain. "Any second now. It's probably time I was getting out of this bath. Oh, I don't know, though. Why stop just when I'm enjoying it?"
"So we're actually going to land in a minute?" said Arthur.
"Well, not so much land, in fact. Not actually land as such. No."
"What are you talking about?" asked Ford sharply.
"Well," said the captain, picking his way through the words carefully, "I think, as far as I can remember, we were programmed to crash on it."
"Crash?" shouted Ford and Arthur.
"Yes," said the captain. "Yes, it's all part of the plan, I think. There was a terribly good reason for it, which I can't quite remember at the moment. It was something to do with,
Ford exploded.
You're a load of useless bloody loonies," he shouted.
Yes, that was it," beamed the captain. "That was the reason."